Okay, everyone, thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm Zane Notafrage with the IAC Intertribal Ag Council under our Technical Assistance Network. But we're joined here with multiple partners on this new project that we'll talk about. I'll give a brief overview of it, then I'll kick it over to our partners. But IAC, we're a nonprofit that started in 1987, basically providing USDA resources for producers and tribes on the ground. And today's program is improving access to grazing resources for Native American producers. And so basically trying to support the conservation needs on tribal land for Native producers. And then I wanted to mention our key role players in this: Farm Journal Foundation, ESMC, and the Field Labs Institute that have been real supportive on this project. But I'll pass it along to Maddie for the next. I wanted to give a brief one because we have a lot to get through and I wanted to save time for questions. And if you have questions, please throw them in the chat box on the bottom there. Or if you're on Facebook too, we'll try to collect those and get to those at the end of the presentation. But if we can't get to them, feel free to reach out to myself, Zane, or Bo Lascelle, or Marlene Work for today's webinar. We're all located here in Montana and can help you through that process as well. But thank you for joining today. I know you guys are probably real busy with branding or calving today, but this will be recorded also too and put on our website so you guys can watch it and pass it along to others. But I'll kick it over to Maddie with Farm Journal Foundation. Thank you.
Thanks, Zane. Thanks everyone for taking the time to be here today. Like Zane said, we know you have busy schedules and getting into the warmer weather, and I'm sure you've got full days. So thanks for taking the time, and it will be recorded if you're not able to stay for the whole thing, or if you have any questions in the follow-up, we'll share contact information as well. I'm Maddie. I'm the program manager for Farm Journal Foundation. Farm Journal Foundation is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization working to advance global food and nutrition security, sustainable ag and rural economic development. We believe in a future where food systems work for everyone, and that is part of the origin of this project. Our basis is in strong farmer livelihoods, robust businesses, healthy natural environments, and nutritious, affordable food for consumers. And achieving this vision starts with you, the producers, bringing all the voices to the table so we can create tangible, innovative solutions that serve us all. And Farm Journal Foundation, on a backstory, we have some connections to Kelsey and Zach Ducheneau. They were part of our Farmer Ambassador program, which is still going strong. I believe we're at over 30 Farmer Ambassadors at this point. And Kelsey and Zach were very early into that program, very vocal on their conservation practices, supporting Native American communities as a part of the basis for their involvement in the program. And we've grown to have a great partnership with them. And a lot of this project is thanks to that great relationship we've been able to build with Zach and Kelsey, and continuing that relationship with Intertribal Ag Council. So we really appreciate IAC's partnership, and hopefully we can go on to do greater things together with them and you as the producers' involvement in this project. So I hope you're interested, and we've got, like Zane said, quite a few slides for you. So we'll try to speed things along so we can get to the question and answer section. I'm also joined by Stephanie Mercier here. She's our lead technical assistance manager, and she'll help us run through some of the slides as well. So we'll be joined by IAC, Farm Journal Foundation, ESMC, and Yield Lab, and we'll all talk about our roles in the project a little bit, give a brief overview, and then leave time for questions at the end. So the origins of this USDA partnership for climate smart commodities is USDA issued a request for proposal, and way back in February of 2022, so almost 2.5 years ago at this point, that encouraged adoption of climate smart agricultural practices by farmers. The goal would be to leverage greenhouse gas benefits of climate smart commodity production, and in this case, beef, and provide direct, meaningful benefits to production agriculture. This funding from this comes out of the Commodity Credit Corporation, or the CCC. There are quite a number of projects under this funding source, 141 at this point, in 53 territories and states. So we understand that you may have heard about other projects in Montana in particular on the ground. And we understand that you might have some options, and you might be trying to navigate what's the best option for you. So we're hoping to help you figure that out and can answer any questions. If none of this is clear to you, please don't hesitate to reach out to us afterwards, and we can provide you with more information. We are a Pool 1 project, or sorry, we're a Pool 2 project, so we're spending up to $5 million. So it's a smaller project, pretty focused on underserved farmers and ranchers. The Pool 1 projects have a much larger funding source of $5 million to $100 million. So summarizing our grant, we mentioned it's from General Foundation, Intertribal Ag Council, ESMC, and the Yield Lab Institute. And we were funded for $4.9 million for 3 years. That agreement was just finalized in December of 2023. 70% of the funding goes towards direct payments and technical assistance to producers. And $1 million of that is indirect funding, and we'll outline what that looks like in a few more slides. So opportunities for cattle ranchers, we're looking to enroll between 70 and 100 cattle ranchers in this program to incentivize the adoption of climate smart practices related to grazing, rangeland management activities, such as rotational grazing. And this is a beef specific project. We're in the process with IAC in developing our outreach plans for enrolling ranchers. And this project will be focused in Florida, Montana, and Oklahoma. And then I'll pass it over to Stephanie now.
Okay, so this is a list of the eligible practices that we have included in our project. And our focus is on rotational grazing, or as NRCS prefers to call it, prescribed grazing. In fact, that's going to sort of be the fundamental practice that we're going to ask all the producers to enroll to either already have or be willing to adopt to get started. But in addition to prescribed grazing, we also have the opportunity for encouraging adoption of fencing and watering facilities, which obviously are complementary to the prescribed grazing, but also such things as adding native or perennial seed species to your range to make it more productive and better forage for your cattle. You can also adopt grazing land mechanical treatment, herbaceous weed treatment, pasture and hay planting, brush management, and then the last eligible practice under our agreement is the prescribed grading practice. Next slide. And as Maddie said, we're going to be able to provide you a number of benefits. The first of all is if you sign up for our program, you're going to get an average of probably about $10,000 per producer in order to enroll in the program. We also will have the opportunity for you to partner with your neighbors or co-operators to partner on more expensive infrastructure projects such as wells or watering facilities. So that would allow you to receive multiples of that $10,000 in order to implement some of the more expensive practices. We think that especially this might be helpful in Montana because we know that there's a lot of folks who run their cattle in common on rangeland, and so this could be a way to approach that. And we also are exploring the option of providing directed vendor payments and direct deposit payments to producers to make it easier from a paperwork point of view for producers. In addition to the incentive payments, we'll be also providing educational material on these climate smart ag practices that I just outlined. Also provide you with technical assistance to help you plan how to implement these practices. And then towards the end of the 3 years, we're also going to be working to provide you opportunities to produce what we call verified carbon credits for sale on carbon markets. And our partners from ESMC will be providing a few more details on that in a couple of minutes. And then finally, we're going to be working with Intertribe Ag Council to try to come up with a way to create a climate smart branded label for the beef products that you guys will be producing. Next slide. And here's what we have in mind in terms of what the payment levels would be for these practices. These are based on EQIP practice payments per acre for the state of Montana. And so we see on a per acre basis what the payments available for this are. And you don't have to memorize this, but this is just sort of an indication of the sorts of resources that we can provide. Next slide. and additional lists there. I mentioned earlier, we're gonna work with IAC to help create a branded product for this. This will be under IAC's American Indian Food Program, which has actually been up and running since 1988 under a contract with the Foreign Ag Service at USDA. And the partnership was developed as a platform for American Indian food businesses to showcase their products and share tribal culture all around the world. And they also have a certified made produced by American Indians trademark that could be part of what we're able to provide you with. Next slide. And I wanted to share with you some information about some research that we found that suggests that adopting rotational grazing provides benefits in terms of reduced input costs to some extent, and also put the potential for improved weight gains for animals. So for example, we know the research done by Economic Research Service found that people who engage in rotational grazing have on average lower feed costs than people with more basic practices. And that a college in Canada did a study a few years ago of continuous versus rotational grazing, and found that calves under rotational grazing gained on average 2.6 pounds per year, while their continuous grazing counterparts gained 2.25 pounds per year. So that's like a 15% difference, which is pretty substantial. And then the last thing I want to mention is that there's evidence that if you can keep your, by these improved grazing practices, you can keep your cattle on grazing land longer, then you can save in terms of energy expenditures, because it takes about 50 pounds of nitrogen and about 1.25 gallons of diesel fuel to raise, harvest, store, and feed a ton of hay to animals. And at the current costs, you can save maybe $18 a month per cow for each month that cow stays on pasture, instead of going into a yard to be fed on grain and oil seeds. Next slide. And we also think there are benefits if you will contemplate adopting a practice of moving to using more native and perennial grass species in your rangeland or pastures. We know that perennial warm season species can last 15 to 20 years or longer on the land. And so you have the potential to realize pretty significant savings in costs from seed, fertilizer, herbicide, and time, when compared to having to do the same thing over and over again with warm season annuals. And also there's strong evidence that these perennial species are more drought tolerant. And so that's a benefit as well. Next slide. And that in terms of those native species, there's a study a few years ago the NRCS published that found that you get a better weight gain from using these native species, such as eastern gamma grass, switchgrass, or big bluestem, as compared to using non-native species such as tall fescue and Bermuda grass. And so there's another benefit as well. Next slide. And then beyond what we think you can generate in terms of benefit on your own operation, we think that there are environmental or broader societal benefits from adopting these new practices. There was a study done a few years ago in Brazil that found that even in the first 2 years, that farms that were adopting these new practices had 19% fewer emissions than non-participating farms, and even a greater gain if they were in the program for longer than 2 years. There was a study done on a cattle ranch in Georgia called White Oaks Pasture that found that the beef raised under rotational grazing practices had a carbon footprint that was 111% lower than the footprint from cattle raised under more conventional operations. And we know that these practices are also beneficial in terms of biodiversity, not just of the grass, but also of other animals and insects and birds that may be living in your area. I think you're up next, Maddie.
Thanks, Stephanie. So we can see some of the highlights of implementing those conservation practices from what Stephanie's shown. I wanted to move into producer eligibility a little bit. So there are some basic requirements for participation in the program. And an FSA number is required. So that that process would start with completing an AD 2047 form by working with your local USDA Service Center office or FSA office. And that includes contact information, a tax ID number, and verifying citizenship status. So not too crazy of information there. And then if eligible, based on that information, enrollment is another aspect that requires a W-2 for tax purposes. This incentive dollars are considered income, and then a producer agreement. And then in terms of working with your local USDA office, FSA would guide you through the next steps after you completed a farm number or AD 2047. And if you already have these established records with FSA, working with your local office to confirm that that documentation is still up to date and current would be the next best step. You're a little bit ahead of the game if you have a 2047 already. And they can help you confirm what the next steps would be for eligibility. We can also help you with that. There's some third-party action that we're allowed to take on as part of this project. So we'd be happy to discuss that with you further if you have questions about that. And then USDA general terms and conditions do require that a farm, tract, and field number and your producer name and core customer ID or CC ID be provided to USDA through project reporting. So by participation in this project, those are some things that us as the project awardees will need to provide to USDA. And then just for reference, if you're wondering where your local FSA office is, you can find it right at this website. And this slideshow will be posted online, so we'll be able to click on this link. But they have a map of Montana, and you'll be able to find your local county office that way. But we can share this information out as well. And I will pass it over to Lizzie Rose and Lisa Walsh, our ESMC partners.
Thanks, Maddie. So Lisa and I are project managers for Ecosystem Services Market Consortium. We know that's a mouthful, so you can just call us ESMC. Our role in the project is to quantify the carbon dioxide that's sequestered in soils from rotational grazing practices. Next slide, Maddie. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of ESMC as an organization, and then talk you through the grazing program overview and timeline. Then we'll look at what data is going to be required, how it will be collected and stored, and we'll go over the soil sampling that will be required for participation, and then sale of any outcomes that are generated. So ESMC's mission is to incentivize farmers and ranchers to improve soil health and scale beneficial environmental outcomes. And we focus on agricultural outcomes that benefit farmers and society in a collective enabling environment. So the way we do this, we are a nonprofit. We're a public-private partnership, and we work within agricultural supply chains. So what this means for this project is that we'd be working with beef producers and beef corporations who use the beef as well. So it stays within that beef supply chain. ESMC uses historical data, a scientific model, soil samples, and weather data to be able to calculate these impacts. So what this project would generate would be impact units. And the way that works is it's 1 metric ton of CO2e equals 1 impact unit. And that's calculated as the difference in the amount of carbon in the soil between the baseline year, so before practice changes are implemented, and then in the project year, so once you implement your rotational grazing practices. Next slide. So to give you a high-level overview of what this process looks like for us. So this summer, you would enroll in the ESMC producer portal, and you would have support to do that. And all that really means is you'd be going into our map-based platform, and you'd be outlining your pastures in there, and then signing a producer agreement. And then in the fall, our partner Earth Optics would come out to your land and conduct soil sampling. This would happen in the first year of the project, and then also in the 3rd year, just to true up the model and make sure we're on the right track. And then you would go ahead and implement your rotational grazing. And then data collection will be done. We would need historical data and your current farm year data into our logbook, and you would also have support to do that. And from that point, it goes into ESMC's hands, and we will take a look at that data, make sure nothing seems off or missing. If something seems maybe incorrect, we'll reach out to you to make sure we've got it right. And then from there, we input the data into the SNAP Graze model. which is going to generate those impact units. So it's going to tell us the metric tons of CO2e that were sequestered in your soil as a result of your practice change. And then we will report the impact units generated in the spring of 2025. And then you would receive payment for those impact units in spring, summer of 2025. Lisa is going to kind of delve into these steps in more detail, starting with soil sampling.
Hi all, so I'm Lisa, I'm another project manager with ESMC. So yeah, like Lizzie said, we'll go more in depth. So starting with soil sampling, this will occur in the first year or last year. So in the first year, it will happen after you have a producer agreement. And so as you can see, we have our sampling density 30 to 50 acres, or one soil sample every 30 to 50 acres that you have enrolled, minimum of one sample per pasture field, and that will be, oh, sorry.
Lisa, if you maybe want to turn your video off, we can't hear your audio right now. Your video off.
I'm sorry, is that any better?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So sorry, I'll go back a little bit. So we'll take one soil sample every 30 to 50 acres that you have enrolled, a minimum of one sample per pasture field, and those will be 12 inches deep. And then wherever you have deep-rooted species, such as alfalfa, fescue, switchgrass in your pastures, Earth Optic soil samplers, they'll go ahead and take a 1 meter deep core. This data will be provided to you via an online portal that Earth Optics has, so you'll be able to see all of your numbers as well as kind of a map outlay of all of this that will be accessible to you. And some of the key soil analysis points that we get is the soil organic carbon, the pH, and the bulk density. Next, please. So here is some of the grazing data parameters that need to be collected, gathered, and then inputted. So all of this is going to be individual and unique to each producer. It's also all on a per herd basis. So you can see that we split it up into 3 categories that we will be collecting. So first is cattle specific. So the number of beef cattle you have per herd, type and number of other animal grazing in that herd, the average starting weight, and then the average ending weight of the grazing season. And then next, you will have acreage specific points, which will be the number of pastures for the herd in 2024, as well as the total acres grazed. And then last, we have date specific points, which will include what date did you start grazing in 2024, what dates did you finish, and then the average days grazed per pasture. So these, again, are parameters that will be collected, and then you will have technical assistance to help input this data. And so then next we'll go into the logistics of how we collect all of this data and store that. So first we have, as Lizzie said, we'll have historical data that we need to collect just the first year to create a baseline. So we're working to assess how many years of historical data we will need. However, we'll only need it once during your first year, which will include all those parameters that I just shared. And then after that, you'll only need to input your data one time annually. The data collection will happen in a logbook that will be created and shared by us at ESMC, and each producer, you will have, again, technical assistance, help with enrollment specialists and partners to help gather and input this data into the logbook, both historical data and annually. Next slide, please. Just to touch on the data storage of this, so the EcoHarvest ESMC program that we're talking about is Ag Data Transparent Certified. Per our producer agreement and general terms and conditions, we state in there that the producer owns and will continue to own the producer's personal information and data, regarding ag management practices entered into the producer portal. So any personal data that you enter, we at ESMC will have access to. However, this personal data is not passed on to our buyers or any model partners, and any data that is shared is anonymized to protect your personal information. And then the last step of this whole process is the sale of outcomes. So for anybody that is interested in selling these outcomes to corporates within their supply shed or where they are supplying their beef from, ESMC, once we get those outcomes, we will facilitate the sale and finding buyers in order to sell those outcomes if desired. And again, just to reiterate, we call these impact units, but they really are just kind of carbon credits. So it would be 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. And those are what our model will go ahead and tell you how much you have removed in your soil carbon. And that is all we have from ESMC. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Lisa. So, and I'm Brandon Day with the Yield Lab Institute. I'll quickly give you an overview of our organization. So we're a global ag tech think tank. We're based in St. Louis, Missouri, and part of what we do in our mission is to enable entrepreneurs to revolutionize agri-food systems to sustainably provide for the world. If you go to the next slide, please. So for your purposes, the team that you'll be interacting from the Yield Lab Institute will be myself and David Paquette, who's the project manager, and he's on the line as well. So we are going to be representing the Institute's team for this program and the Grazing initiative. If you next slide, please. Give you a little bit of background on us. So like I said, we're an ag tech think tank, and part of what we do is we develop methodologies and ways to measure programs and outcomes from programs, similar to what we're trying to do with all you livestock producers in Montana. And we have a history of doing this around the world, and we've got a lineup here of some of those types of programs that we've done notably in Latin America and Africa. And so what we're tasked with in this program is really to develop a way to measure outcomes, measure the programs, measure that what we're intending to do and implement, that we can find either data or proxy of that data and the things that you share with us during your interactions, that we can measure that and see if there's a way to see how those programs are being implemented throughout the grant. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to David, who will outline specifically how that's going to work in your interactions with us.
Yeah, if we can go to the next slide, please. One more. So the producer practice progress measurements that we're going to use during the course of this program, everything that is provided to us will be made anonymous, and we're going to use the data that you're providing to other partners within this organization. And the goal here is to determine if there is a correlation between the conservation practices that will be necessary to participate in the program, and how that's correlating to financial impacts for all of you and environmental impacts on your land. So we're going to monitor the progress across the program at the producer level. Once again, it will be anonymous and confidential at the state level and the national level. And so your participation will help us determine future conservation practices that might benefit your communities. Next slide, please. So what are we tracking? The way we're approaching this is the conservation practices will be the first bucket that we're looking at, and that information will be provided as you receive funding for those different conservation practices. And then we're going to look at the environmental raw data that's coming out of your land on a yearly basis, the environmental output, the IUs that were just mentioned, and the financial impact for you all. The perfect story is that the conservation practices are helping the environment on your land, but also helping you all be in a better financial situation. And then we'll tie this to the inputs and the correlation between the money spent going into this program in each different region. Next slide. So the interaction you'll have with us, it could be very limited. The survey and all the information that you're providing, we will use that to kind of conduct our correlation analysis during the course of the program. What's not required by you, but also very helpful when we do these initiatives around the world, are interviews and discussions with the producers in this case. They're usually 45-minute casual. We keep them super confidential. So anything you tell us and any sentiment you might have about the program just stays between us in that case. But what it really helps us do is capture pain points for producers so that we can try to measure those throughout the program and see if there's a correlation between being able to join different programs with your affiliation in this one and how that's impacting you. So as this goes forward, definitely not required, but your insights are super helpful to how we will determine the future, of the program. So. And I just wanted to bring this up here today. This is just in case you do see it in any kind of documentation. This is what it looks like as an internal evaluation program progress, how we're viewing it. So if this does appear, this is what it is in any of the things you see. I think that's it for us.
All right, thanks, Brandon and David. And then we have a couple slides left. So if you feel like you're ready to apply or you want to take interest in what's next, we've outlined the steps here. So step 1 would be to fill out our short interest survey or reach out to FJF or IAC if you're not comfortable with filling out that survey just yet. The survey can be reached through this QR code. There's also a link here. There's also a link on our website, which I'll share later on. And step 2 would be that program staff will follow up with you to talk more about your operation, talk about what kind of practices you're interested in, what that might look like in implementation, what that might look like incentive-wise and funding-wise for you, and how that would look once you get to the implementation steps. And then the enrollment process would begin. Like we mentioned previously, there are some eligibility requirements that would have to be met first, and then the enrollment process would begin with the producer agreement, and then we'd be ready to go. So I wanted to open it up to some questions at this point. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. And then I was also going to guide us through the FAQ that we have on our website. Share the website as a resource if there's any more information needed at a later date. So I will bring that back up. So this is our website based on the Farm Journal Foundation website. It highlights a lot of the information that we've shared today on the webinar. A lot of the introductory information that would help you make a determination of whether this project is a good fit for you. We also have an FAQ as well. If you don't get a chance to tune into this webinar and you have some questions later on, that's a good guide for some further questions and information. We also have our contact information. So in Montana particularly, we're led by Zane Not Afraid. We're also joined by Bo here today. And then in our other 2 projects, we of course have technical assistance specialists there as well. And then you can also reach out to me, Maddie Skelly at Farm Journal Foundation. There's a little bit more information about what practices are being included in the project. And then information about our partners. So just to give you an idea of what the FAQ looks like here, give you some flavor of the questions. Let's see, any good question here. So some things to point out. Can I enroll in this project if I am enrolled in another USDA program, such as Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP, or the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP? Answer, you can enroll in a different field in this project than those currently covered under an EQIP or CSP contract, or you can add a new practice to the field in addition to any covered under the existing CSP or EQIP contract. That is something that's especially relevant with a lot of programs under USDA. We can understand that that might be confusing, so just need to lay that out clearly that it's not a barrier to enrolling if you're enrolled in other projects. We just need to make sure that the practices and the fields are eligible under this different project. And then as far as technical assistance, who will provide technical assistance to implement these practices? Technical assistance will be available from the Intertribal Ag Council technical assistance staff in your state. So in this instance, Montana, as well as from rangeland specialists consulting on this project. Producers will also have access to an extensive online resource library with information about the climate smart practices, including economic benefits, environmental benefits, and implementation how-tos. So that's meant to be a library that is available to producers in this project, and not only producers in this project. We'd like to be able to see that scope of that resource really expand to other tribal producers as well. So if you feel as though others in your community could benefit from that and may not be enrolled in this project, they'll have access to that as well. In terms of personal data management, there are parts of the data that are required to be sent to USDA. So I think I mentioned that previously. And that is all outlined under USDA Climate Smart Commodities FAQ website. And if you view the section labeled Data Management and Reporting. And then that's kind of the end of the FAQ, but that document is building and is a live document. So if other questions come up and seem to be particularly relevant, we'll continue to build that out. Let's see if we have any more questions. All right. Not seeing any questions right now, but this recording will be available online. And we'll be continuing to do outreach in each of the 3 states that we've been discussing, Montana, Oklahoma, and Florida. And Zane, Stephanie, and I are hoping to be on the ground in Montana in late June. So maybe we'll see you out there at a later date. And we want to thank you very much for your time today. And please feel free to share this this document and the website with your peers, family, friends. And we do have some contact information that I can share as well. Back to sharing my screen one more time. So you can reach out to Zane Not Afraid. He's interregional manager at IAC. You can reach out to Bo LaSalle. He's a Rocky Mountain Technical Assistance Specialist in Montana. You can also reach out to Marlene Work, also a Technical Assistance Specialist in Montana, or you can reach out to myself. And if you have any questions outside of IAC and Farm Journal Foundation, we can always direct those questions to the right folks at ESMC and the Yield Lab Institute. Again, we want to thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, please reach out.
Maddie,
Yeah,
we do
Marley?
have one question.
Oh, okay.
The question is, are there any plans to work with additional states?
At this time, there's not plans to work with additional states. Part of the reason that Montana, Florida, and Oklahoma were chosen is for their climate attributes and the fact that each of them are a little bit different environmentally and ecosystem wise, as well as the tribal relations that IAC has been able to develop over their years as an organization. So at this time, no, but the USDA project dashboard has a list of all the projects that are available under Climate Smart Commodities. So there may be a possibility that if that's the question, you may be able to find one under your state if you're from another state or you're looking for someone else. Are there any more questions? You can submit to the chat. Give it a minute or two just to see if any come in. Thanks, Alvin. That sounds great if you share that out. All right, looks like we might be wrapping up the questions now. Like I said, we're always available for outreach. If you have any more questions, our information is online. Or you can reach out directly to your IAC technical assistance specialist if you have any questions directly relating to them, and they'll be the folks on the ground, so you'll be seeing a lot of them hopefully. We want to thank you again for your time. And we'll hope to see you out on the ground in Montana. Thanks for your interest. Have a good rest of your day.